Hi and welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and what I have here in my hand is a bin that I built to put worms into. I built it 40 days ago, and underneath the plastic there's a variety of different types of paper and cardboard and stuff like that, as well as some food that I had put in there. But by now I would think 40 days later it's probably just mush. And there's still even a little dampness under there. I'm surprised, but it's the home that I had intended for the worms that used to live in here. The worms that lived in here inside this VermiBag Mini were European night crawlers, and it was 28 days ago that I bought an end to this system and I relocated the contents. And the contents of what used to be in the VermiBag are now in these two trays right here. And you can tell that they're a little different from the rest of my other trays because all my other trays have a label on them indicating how long the system has been in service, but in my mind, these are really just an extension of what was going on inside the VermiBag. All I really did was I ran the material through a screen so that some of the material, the fine castings, ended up in one bin, along with any cocoons that might have been in the material, and anything that didn't go through the screen, that includes the worms, was put into the other bin. And I've just been leaving the material a little bit of extra time, number one, to let it dry, so that the clumpy stuff that the worms are in can more readily be screened if I wanted to do so. And also giving the cocoons that are inhabiting the castings a little time to possibly hatch out. Maybe we'll end up with some baby worms. But, 28 days later, it seems like it might be time for this interim solution to start drawing to a close. I don't think it's going to happen today, but I'm checking in today because it's been a week since we looked in on these bins, and we're going to see how things are shaping up. So let's get to work. Now, I did take a little peek under the paper. It's a little unusual. It's something I haven't really seen in many of my other bins, but in these two, for whatever reason, there just seems to be a whole bunch of mold growing on the top surface of the material. It's usually not a problem because the worms do eat mold, and they like it from what I understand. Holy cow, look at that. The reason I believe we're seeing a pretty good turnout over there in the bin that's got the worms is because last week I finally set up food over there on the edge of the bin in the hopes that we might start luring some of the inhabitants of the bin out of the material that they're in. And after quite some time of getting no food, I can imagine that these worms are pretty motivated to get into some fresh food. So it's not too surprising to see a whole bunch of them hanging out there. But I guess the other aspect of hanging out up on the very top surface there right beneath the plastic is that you get a whole bunch of moisture collecting over there. Oops, almost missed a couple here. So they clearly enjoy coming up for the moisture too. Now I didn't really do much in this bin last week. All we really did was give the material a quick inspection to see how things look. We did notice that the material had a lot of little creepy crawly, what appear to be mites in there. So I've been using the stuff that I've got, this neem cake, because supposedly neem cake is something that the worms really like eating, but it's also something that does away with mites by inhibiting their reproductive cycle. And while it doesn't kill off the mites that you have today, it's preventing the mites that you might have tomorrow. So in here, after 28 days, this is kind of what I'm treating as sort of a cocoon nursery. And usually I allow a little bit of time because cocoons need time to hatch. And I don't know the exact amount of time that's required for European nightcrawler cocoons. But after 28 days, it might be time to begin assuming that the material might have baby worms crawling around in it. And if there are, then it's time to start giving them a place that they can retreat to as well, just like we did for these worms over here. A place over on the edge that was already set up as sort of like a bedding area with fresh cardboard and paper and dampness. But the one thing that we just didn't really take note of the last time we picked around in here was any baby worms. Sometimes it makes me wonder if maybe the conditions I've got are not completely ideal which means that the cocoons are just sort of sitting around for that ideal time to start hatching. It's like in the winter or any time of year or any sort of condition where the worms start to sense that there's something that could jeopardize their population. They lay down a bunch of cocoons sort of in a preservation of the colony reaction. And then if it's, say for the example, the beginning of winter, those cocoons could just sit for months and the worms will only crawl out once the cold weather retreats and the conditions become favorable for the baby worms to emerge. And I've got a couple cocoon nurseries like this set up, but it's in this one only that I believe I don't see any baby cocoons. I mean, baby worms running around within the material. Not even one. That was part of the reasoning why I didn't really proceed with the setting up of food over in the bedding area that I had created, because if there's no worms to lure over there, then why have a feeding area? I mean, I think we may have even inspected this material on this end of the bin. It seems unlikely that... Well, okay. We do see a couple worms hanging out over here, and they do seem kind of small, juvenile size worms. Oh, there are a couple of them over there. How do you like that? That's cool. A little bit unexpected. I don't remember if I had checked the material on this edge of the bin. Maybe I didn't. I guess since this is the side of the bin where I've been adding a little bit of moisture and I laid down some fresh bedding, maybe the worms are coming over to take advantage of the moisture, since this end of the bin is actually drying. But these are definitely baby worms. I mean, I don't know how long they've been around. I can't tell from the size of a baby worm exactly how old it is, but I'm definitely seeing baby worms over here. So who knows? Maybe this material is so dry already that they just immediately head over to that side of the bin, find the moisture that they're seeking, and then they stay. So I guess what I've really been holding off on is adding food to this side of the bin, not knowing if there is going to be any worms to be fed over here. I've just been adding moisture. But perhaps it's time to add a little something so that these worms have a little something to nibble on. And then at some point we can start thinking about hauling the contents of this bedding / feeding area out of here. But I think I will have to head upstairs to grab some food to drop into here. And then we'll also spray in a little bit of dampness, a little bit of water. We'll also be sure to include some of this neem cake, just in case there's still mites hanging out in here. And we definitely saw mites in here because I did some close-up video shooting of this stuff, and I saw them creeping and crawling all over the place in here. So now I guess we'll do a similar inspection of this side. I was treating this side of the bin with neem cake as well. Somehow I felt like I saw a greater number of mites in this stuff over here, but I'm assuming that they're in both. And the other thing we noticed last time was we peeked in underneath this piece of towel that was laid down right beneath all the material that was placed into here, because this bin has holes in it, and I thought that the towel laid down would prevent it from dropping out the bottom. So for whatever reason, that towel seemed like a place that the worms were all kind of hanging out beneath. But right over here I don't see any. Perhaps the fact that we added food into this last week became a reason for them to head on over there and start evacuating this material in favor of the dampness and the food showing up over on the other side of the bin. So down under here, I'm taking a peek underneath the towel. I saw 1 or 2 worms, but not too many, as well as a worm over here, which we're going to help that little guy right over to where we want them to be, which is over in the feeding area. I'm curious to see how this material is shaping up in terms of being evacuated by the worms. I mean, here again I'm finding another one, but luckily not too many. I think that the migration attempt is working, hopefully. Here too I see another worm. So some of them might just not have gotten the memo. Or maybe just some of them have a greater tolerance for dry material and a lack of food. And that is part of the reason I'm allowing this stuff to be covered with only paper. And the plastic coverings are only on that side. The plastic coverings will force the recirculation of the moisture over on that side. And the paper coverings on this side only will allow for ongoing evaporation of the material. So, put that bedding over there. So I think we're going to check that feeding area to see how the food supply that I put in there a week ago is holding up. I mean, if all the worms that used to be in that VermiBag Mini that ended up in this container have all, for the most part, made their way over there, with the exception of the few that we found out here in this stuff, then I would think that that food that was put in there for them might be starting to run a little bit low. I guess I'll bring food down here for replenishing the food in this area. And I think we'll actually start trying to initiate the migration of the worms and that stuff too. So I'll bring down enough to put into both. I just like the idea of bringing up some of the more damp material that's down low and submerging the drier stuff that's had time out here on the surface to shed a little bit of its moisture. So I'm tilling it up and agitating it a little bit just to get the material set up so that it continue to dry a little bit more. I often think that I might give a little crush to the stuff while it's in my hands to see if I can break up some of these larger chunks to make the material flow a little bit more readily. And I believe that even on its own it does tend to flow pretty nicely to a certain degree. Because like I said, this is the stuff that all got caught in my screen, so none of it was fine enough to look that way, like what's over here in this bin. That was 4 weeks ago, but you know, over time this stuff is starting to dry enough that it either breaks apart on its own or I'm able to break it apart in my hands like this. And then at some point this stuff might be some nice finished castings as well, instead of just a bunch of lumpy stuff. Lumpy stuff that I allowed to get a little bit too damp, so it all clumped together. But it does seem like it's coming along. And it does seem like we've got ourselves probably a pretty good turnout over here already. So let's take a quick examination of how things look in here. So, I mean, if all the worms that used to be in the VermiBag Mini, which were actually inhabiting this material 4 weeks ago, and up until 1 week ago that we gave them a reason to move out with a feeding area over here, then we should probably expect to see a good number of worms over on this side of the bin. And we definitely see them hanging out. I could see this right here is the coffee, part of the food that was placed in here for them. This right here is a chunk of banana peel. This paper towel came in with the food last time as well. And I mean, a banana peel usually doesn't get consumed by the worms in a week's time. It usually takes a little longer for a peel to get broken down. I'm sure that they strip all the really soft, gooey stuff off the inner part of it, but the outer skin of the banana peel probably takes a little bit more time for the worms to be able to break down. So I believe it would probably make good sense to come down here equipped with a little bit of food to give these little guys too. And I got a feeling it might be time to start thinking about migrating these worms out of this container soon. We've definitely got ourselves a good turnout over here. I didn't really envision today as the day that I would launch off that bin with the Euros in it that came out of the VermiBag. Today I just wanted to make sure that they've got an ample supply of food to keep this migration moving, and if nothing else, then just to, you know, whatever worms have made their way over here, to keep them staying in here. Not that I think that they would move back out here for any real reason, because it is pretty barren of food and gradually becoming more and more barren of moisture as well. So I'm going to head upstairs really quick to the kitchen, grab some stuff out of my freezer, and we're going to set both of these up. This one with a little bit more food and this one with some food to initiate the migration of the worms. And I believe that at some point soon we're going to be able to launch off a new bin with these little guys. So I'll be back in just a minute. So the portion of food that you see here for these little guys is a variety of fruits and veggies, stuff out of my freezer. So I believe we're going to drop in some banana peel, I guess a chunk of lettuce. I didn't see too many worms, I don't think, in this baby bin here, or Cocoon nursery, whatever you want to refer to it as. So I don't know if we have to go too overboard with the portion of food that we're going to put in here. But I wanted to have something going on over here for them to nibble on. And I think between these lettuce leaves, which should be pretty easy food for them to eat. Here's a piece of kiwi peel, a little bit of sugar content for them. Here's the butt end of a cucumber, banana peel. I think we've got a pretty nice assortment of stuff for these baby worms to feast on. In the absence of food, who knows how long it's been since these worms have seen any food. Well, actually, if they're baby worms, then they've never seen food. They've only lived in these finished castings, which were probably almost entirely devoid of anything to eat. So the only thing they've had was the carbon-based food, if they were able to utilize some of this bedding material as food. So certainly not much, that's for sure. So we'll use this bedding material here to cover up with. But you know what? Let's also, I'm going to bring in my squirt bottle here. I'm going to dampen this cardboard as I drop it in. Because it's already, I can feel the dampness. It's got a little bit of moisture content to it already. And I know that the veggies that we're placing in here will also emit a little bit of dampness as they begin to thaw and they begin to break down. So that's all good too. I just want to make sure that this material stays nice and damp and cozy so that the baby worms feel comfortable in here. And I'm glad that I've got a good abundant amount of cardboard and paper in here too, because this being night crawlers do really enjoy a carbon-based food in a lot of cases. So I think that they can pretty readily make a pretty nice meal out of this cardboard stuff too. Now, before I cover up with the last few bits of cardboard here, let's not forget to apply some of this neem cake. All that pieces of banana peel, cucumber, who knows, that stuff could potentially draw mites too, and if it does, I'd like for the mites to also be exposed to this neem so that it hopefully does away with them. The video I shot a couple weeks ago got in really close to some of the creepy crawlies that I observed on the surface of this material here. And it looked like there was a variety of different mites inhabiting this bin. And they were just going bananas, hanging out on the surface here. So I've been adding neem cake for the past couple weeks now into here, hopefully producing the effect of fewer and fewer mites over time. But the same way I did in previous check-ins, I'm going to be coating the top surface of this material with this stuff. It's also something that the worms like to eat, from what I understand, so it's kind of a win-win. It's good for the worms as food, but it's also bad for the mites. So we'll save some to add to this system over here as well. Let me just treat the top surface here as well. Make sure we put a nice ample amount on here. But before we finish, let me just give this feeding area another shot of dampness. Make it really nice and cozy for the baby worms to be over there. And if I'm not mistaken, I've probably been putting grit in there. I believe I have. If I haven't, maybe next time I come in here I should. But for now, I'm going to leave this just the way it is. So now for here, we're going to pretty much take the remainder of what I've got in this tray and drop it in. And that should really please the worms that have come over into this side of the bin. It does appear to me like they've more or less depleted the majority of the food that they were given, with the exception of that banana peel right there. Which, like I said earlier, is something that should take a little bit longer for them to do away with. So that's perfectly normal for that to be sticking around as leftovers. But all the other stuff that was put in here a week ago, I believe it was mainly lettuce type stuff, leafy, soft stuff that should have probably been quite easy for the worms to eat. I'm assuming that they've more or less done away with that stuff over the course of the past week. And at some point soon I will be back in here to snatch out these worms, pull them right out of here and get them going in their new space. And you gotta admit, when we looked around through the material out here, we did not really observe a huge number of worms, and the few that we did, we tossed them over into the feeding area. So I'm not even sure how much longer I've got to allow for this process here to continue. I could very well be near the end of it. And there's probably no reason. I probably could have gone ahead with the extraction of worms today and the launching of that new environment for them, but I just figured I'd wait a little bit longer, and we'll dedicate a whole show to pulling them out and getting them situated in their new home. I think what I wanted to do was I didn't remove the plastic to show you what the contents of that new bin looks like, but it was built with pretty much no natural materials. Almost the entire, I believe with the exception of the food that was placed in there, in addition to all the bedding was made up of cardboard type stuff, cardboard and paper. So I really wanted to kind of dress up that environment a little bit before I introduce worms into it. So I wanted to sprinkle some leaves in there, kind of give it a little bit of a natural flavor, and give those leaves a little bit of time to break in before the worms get introduced. So I'll probably just do that. I'll do that off camera, maybe right now after we finish here, and sort of set that up so that the material has a day or two to prime, and then I believe we'll be coming back in here shortly to get these little guys relocated into their new home over in that bin that I showed earlier, that 40-day-old bin. So if we wait like 2 more days, that'll make it 42 days. That means that that bin has been priming for 6 whole weeks, which is a pretty good, significant amount of time. So I would think that that space should be quite nice and cozy for the worms to be moved into. So let's see. This neem cake likes to stick to the little plastic cups. So let's see. I'm pretty sure I took care of what I was after today. I wanted to see how the food was doing in this migration area and whether it was drawing a crowd. And we certainly confirmed that it is drawing a crowd. And we confirmed that it's been for the most part depleted, which is a good thing. So replenishing it was certainly the thing to do in here. And then over here, we were questioning whether it would be necessary to set up the migration area, whether we should even expect to see any baby worms, because every inspection of the castings material has kind of yielded nothing in terms of seeing any baby worms in here. But who knows? Maybe they're just beelining it over to the bedding area where the moisture has been kept pretty abundant, and maybe that's why we're not seeing any of them out here in the finished castings. So I think it was a good move to place some food in there so that those few baby worms that we spotted in here already have a little something to nibble on. And who knows, maybe as more cocoons hatch, if any more hatch, then we'll give those worms a reason to head over there as well. So that's pretty much it for today. Let's get this on top as well. So I'm glad to see how things are progressing in here. They're progressing nicely. But that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please remember to leave me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Bye now.